This has been an awful week for Melania Trump. Melania Trump has gone missing. No one knows where she is. The last time she was seen was in July 4th at the disastrous fireworks event. She did not go to the NATO summit with Donald. He did bring Natalie Harp, who is referred to as his human printer. Other people call him or call her something else as it relates to Donald Trump. Now, one of the things we're seeing as Melania just kind of disappears and as she is just nowhere to be found, she has her fixer.
My decision to skip the inauguration, what people don't realize, or my decision to make choices at the beginning of this year that suited me were met with such ridicule and criticism. Like, people couldn't believe that I was saying no for any other reason, that they had to assume that my marriage was falling apart.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's like, while I'm here really trying to own my life and intentionally practice making the choice that was right for me, and it took everything in my power to not do the thing that was right, or that was perceived as right, but do the thing that was right for me.
Michelle Obama has spent years developing a style of political criticism that stands apart from almost everyone else in the public spotlight. Instead of relying on loud attacks or dramatic confrontations, she typically speaks in a calm, measured tone, often without mentioning Donald Trump by name. Yet her remarks frequently spark strong reactions because they invite audiences to draw their own comparisons rather than telling them what to think. In this video, we're taking a closer look at some of her most discussed public comments about both Donald Trump and Melania Trump, including remarks delivered over several years and recent statements that have reignited debate. We'll also examine why many political observers believe her approach has remained influential long after leaving the White House. Unlike comedians or partisan commentators who lean on direct criticism, Michelle Obama often focuses on describing the qualities she believes define effective leadership, using examples from Barack Obama's presidency as her point of reference. Supporters argue that this strategy allows her to make broader points without turning every speech into a personal attack. She has also addressed Melania Trump in public interviews on rare occasions, creating moments that received significant media attention because of how carefully she chose her words. As we go through these examples, you'll see why her communication style continues to generate conversation, and why many people believe it carries a different kind of political impact than the more confrontational rhetoric that often dominates today's headlines.
Show up, especially as people start to ask questions about Melania's dark past. She puts this guy out here. His name is Mark Beckman. He says he's the senior advisor to Melania, and things are getting really bad and desperate when you bring Mark Beckman out for Melania. We've talked about this before when she gave that disastrous press conference about her dark past, and she said everything about me and Epstein is false, and if you see any emails that have my names, it's false, and Ghislaine, everything's false. There's no connection there. Then that's when her fixer shows up, Mark Beckman, and now this is like so over the top. He just started doing his media rounds, and he's like, okay, what lots of people don't know about Melania, she's the only person who's brought peace between Zelensky and Putin. The only sustainable peace that's taken place between Ukraine and Russia, Melania did. Melania deserves credit for that. And so, as Melania is just livid that Donald Trump went off on the NATO summit with Natalie, and he walks around with Natalie Harp, Mark Beckman is like,
the media just calmly lists all the times Melania has copied Michelle Obama's looks, and it's honestly brutal without even trying. From the speech plagiarism drama to near-identical dresses and coat moments.
You work hard for what you want in life. From a young age, my parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life.
The gallery basically screams single white first lady while pretending it's just fashion commentary. It makes Melania's whole style era look like a slightly cheaper reboot of Michelle's, minus the warmth, charisma, and, original ideas.
Is Donald Trump's new top appointee getting ready to betray him? Kevin Warsh, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, has indicated what's referred to as a hawkish slant, but that shouldn't surprise you because that's been Kevin Warsh's background, is he defined himself as being someone not just with a hawkish slant, but as a hawk, somebody who tries to kind of control the joint responsibilities of the Fed by not being afraid to raise interest rates, which is fascinating because the guy that Donald Trump attacked, Jerome Powell, was known as being someone who lowered interest rates, but more of an inclination to lower interest rates to drive economic growth in Jerome Powell, who Trump appointed, by the way, during his first term, who Trump incessantly attacked. And so Donald Trump may try to, act like inflation is down and things are going amazing and everything is great, but I want you all to pay attention to some of these board meetings at the Fed that are taking place.
One reason Michelle Obama's speeches continue to attract attention is that they often rely on contrast rather than confrontation. During the opening celebration for the Barack Obama Presidential Center in Chicago on June 18th, she reflected on her husband's years in office before an audience that included former presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Joe Biden, along with well-known performers and public figures. While celebrating Barack Obama's legacy, she described him as someone who remained calm under pressure, stayed focused during difficult moments, and consistently kept his attention on long-term goals. One particular remark drew a noticeable reaction from the audience because many listeners interpreted it as an indirect comparison with Donald Trump, even though she never mentioned him by name. She continued by highlighting accomplishments from Barack Obama's presidency, including efforts related to the economy, healthcare, national security, the auto industry, and receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. By presenting those achievements as part of a broader reflection on leadership, rather than framing them as a direct attack on anyone else, she allowed viewers to make their own comparisons. That communication style has become one of her defining characteristics and remains a major reason her speeches continue to receive widespread attention across news coverage, political commentary, and social media discussions.
Melania basically created peace between Russia and Ukraine. You all see the piece, right? Listen to what he says here. Play this clip.
Let's think about what she's done as it relates to the war in Russia, Ukraine. I think it's fair to say that our First Lady has created the only tangible, the only substantive steps towards peace. As you highlighted, she has led the charge. She and her representative have led the charge for 4 reunifications between Ukrainian children and Russian children and their families. It's a major, major undertaking, and I could tell you, I'm happy to report now that she's in the process of organizing the 5th reunification, David.
And then he also said, and also, you may have seen in the movie, Melania Trump also responsible for bringing back the hostages to Israel. Melania saved the hostages. Without Melania, that wouldn't happen. Here, play this clip.
But she's doing so much more. And the mainstream media is not talking about it. I mentioned the reunification of families. She's doing more behind the scenes that nobody's talking about. This probably should be talked about. Can you talk about all the things she's doing that people aren't hearing about in the mainstream media?
Well, you mentioned reunification. Let's start with her humanitarian efforts because they really are remarkable. First, dating back pre-administration, before the inauguration. Remember, you might have seen it in her movie Melania. She played a significant role in actually creating freedom for one of the Israeli hostages, Keith Siegel.
Melania Trump never talked to Michelle Obama for advice on how to be a first lady.
How you extended that same courtesy to Melania Trump. Has she reached out to you and asked for any help?
No, she hasn't.
The comment sparked fresh chatter about behind-the-scenes traditions in the White House, with some seeing it as a missed moment for mentorship, and others viewing it as a reflection of very different personal styles.
What Kevin Warsh is saying in his speeches regarding, he goes, I'm not going to allow inflation I'm going to make sure inflation hits that kind of 2%, and I'm going to do what I need to do in order to do that. Also, Kevin Warsh on Friday announced a board to kind of look at the work of the Federal Reserve. And if you look at the board that he put together, I'm not out here saying, it's like the greatest thing, but he did not bring on voices that were purely like MAGA voices. And so if you're paying attention to some of these signs that are going on behind the scenes, you are, I think, looking to see, more likely than not, raising interest rates, and it'll be fascinating, to bring down inflation. Although I think we'll have to see with these employment readouts what's going on there, because, one of the other issues is you may need to reduce interest rates when you have employment, losing all of these jobs. Let me show you what Donald Trump said when he was in the NATO summit in Turkey, where he said, inflation is way down, everything is great.
When Michelle Obama reached the point where she mentioned Barack Obama receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, she briefly paused before continuing, and that short moment quickly became one of the most talked about parts of the speech. Many people in the audience immediately understood why the line carried extra weight. Barack Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 in recognition of his efforts to strengthen international diplomacy, a fact that has long been part of his presidential legacy. Over the years, Donald Trump has also spoken publicly about the award and expressed interest in receiving similar recognition, making the comparison impossible for many viewers to ignore. Michelle Obama never explained the contrast or pointed anyone out directly. Instead, she simply continued with her remarks, leaving the audience to connect the dots on their own. That restraint is part of what makes her speaking style so distinctive. Rather than spelling out every implication, she often trusts listeners to understand the context for themselves. The reaction inside the room, including visible laughter from some attendees, suggested that many interpreted the moment in exactly the same way. Political communication often depends as much on timing as on the words themselves, and this became another example of how a carefully delivered pause can shape the way an audience receives a message. Supporters viewed it as a reminder of Barack Obama's diplomatic achievements, while critics and commentators debated the broader comparison to more recent foreign policy decisions, keeping the discussion alive long after the event ended.
He was in contact with Aviva Siegel, and because of the First Lady's efforts, 2 Israeli hostages who were being held in Gaza were both freed, Evyatar David as well as Keith Siegel. So that's incredible.
And then, I told you, right? Then on this state regime media, whatever the heck this is right here, the host is like, could you imagine what people would be saying if this was Dr. Jill stopping the war between Ukraine and Russia, stopping Russia's war in Ukraine, doing all of these? Could you imagine if Dr. Jill would get credit? First off, why do all you have to if you think you've done things that are merit applause or whatever, just stand on business, just stand on it. Why is it always Dr. Jill, former President Biden, Obama? Watch what this guy says here, play this clip.
And these are the stories that we need to tell. If her name was Dr. Jill Biden, CNN would be falling over themselves to report on all of these things. Instead, we have to go and make sure we scream this from the rooftops, because nobody is realizing how consequential this First Lady is, probably one of the most significant First Ladies we've had in a generation.
Prices are coming down. We're doing amazing, which we all know is not true. Here, play this clip.
Announced on Truth Social a couple days ago that Walmart was cutting the price for ground beef by 15%. How big of a deal is that for American customers this summer?
So Walmart has agreed to cut their prices very substantially because things are going down. We're getting it down. We inherited very high prices. We inherited the highest prices in the history of our country. Or 48 years to be exact, but I don't believe that. I think it's in history. So under Biden, they had tremendous inflation. Under the Democrats, we had tremendous inflation, record-setting inflation. And now, inflation is way down. Everything is great. We have, the prices are coming down, but we inherited, they talk about they use different words to describe it. They had very high prices. The prices are coming down.
From that point forward, Michelle Obama continued highlighting what she described as defining characteristics of Barack Obama's presidency, pointing to issues such as public health, financial oversight, marriage equality, respect for scientific expertise, and offering reassurance during moments of national tragedy. She concluded that section by praising the grace, composure, and steady leadership she believed he displayed throughout his time in office, language that many observers interpreted as inviting an unspoken comparison with today's political climate. She then shifted to a more direct discussion of challenges her family faced, recalling false claims about Barack Obama's birthplace, faith, and patriotism that circulated for years before enduring his political career. Those remarks referenced a widely documented controversy that became a significant part of the national political conversation. Expanding beyond those personal experiences, Michelle Obama argued against judging Americans based on their background or identity, and emphasized that no individual has the authority to decide who is or is not sufficiently American. News organizations noted that although she never mentioned specific officials by name, many listeners interpreted her comments as reflecting broader concerns about contemporary immigration debates and the tone of national politics. By combining reflections on past events with broader themes of citizenship, leadership, and public service, she delivered a speech that generated extensive discussion well beyond the ceremony itself.
And then they just bring on more guests. They then have this individual who goes by Liberty Valkyrie, and she says that Melania deserves all the credit in the world for bringing forward this foster for care legislation, which has completely solved the foster system. And then she goes, if anyone doesn't support it, if you don't support her legislation, you've got TDS, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. Valkyrie, let me ask you this question, Val. Who controls Congress right now? Republicans control the House. Republicans control the Senate. Donald Trump's in the White House. You also control the right-wing Supreme Court. So Melania's Foster the Care program, it hasn't even gotten out of a committee in the House of Representatives. You want applause when the legislation hasn't even got out of the Republican committees, when y'all control all branches of government. So you're attacking the Republicans for undermining Melania? Here, play this clip.
And you still have politicians, because they suffer from TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, are refusing to sign off on these programs to facilitate the most marginalized community that we have in this country. And I just have to say, thank you to Melania. I have never seen a first lady put so much effort into a community that I have seen Melania put into the foster youth. There is not another first lady, you guys can Google it, you can Grok it, you can chat GPT it, that has put the amount of effort and work into helping out the foster youth. And as a former foster youth myself, I was in the system since I was born, just so we're clear, in California. I grew up in group homes, moving to different foster homes. Sometimes I was lucky enough to be in with a family member, but I went through the gamut of the foster care system, and anybody that is attempting to shut down these foster the youth accounts truly don't care about marginalized communities.
Which, of course, we know is utterly false. Everything about what he said when Biden left, inflation was about 3% year over year. Right now it's at 4.3, 4.5% year over year and rising. The Walmart thing is basically made up. He pulled that same scheme for Thanksgiving and said they reduced the prices of Thanksgiving at 25%. That's his go-to move, is just trying to take advantage of potential discounts being offered that really aren't that, and then claim that that's somehow reducing inflation. Let me show you what Trump previously said about Kevin Warsh, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, at the time that Donald Trump picked him as the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, where he said he certainly wants to cut rates. Here, play this clip.
Did Kevin Warsh commit to you that he will push to cut interest rates if he is confirmed?
No, but we talked about it, and I've been following them, and I don't want to ask him that question. I think it's inappropriate, probably. It probably would be allowed, but I want to keep it nice and pure. But he certainly wants to cut rates. I've been watching him for a long time.
Well, if you've been watching him for a long time, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, Warsh seemed to say what he needed to say to